The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. I'm Robert Jakowski, Managing Partner for On-Demand Advisors, and today our topic that we're going to cover is engineering your revenue growth for 2023. Today's focus is going to be on the customer upsell and cross-sell best practices that we're going to cover in today's webinar. We are going to share with you many different client examples to bring this to life for all of you. And as with all of our webinars that we have at On-Demand Advisors, we absolutely encourage you to participate in our polls, to ask questions, and the more interactive, the better. So we really appreciate you coming today. We want to make sure that this is a tremendously beneficial webinar for you today in terms of applying for your success next year. So all questions are welcome. And if we don't get to all of your questions in today's webinar, then I will follow up with you one-on-one to make sure that we do that. This webinar is part of a 4-series webinar where we're talking about the 4 revenue growth vectors for your company. 2 weeks ago, we talked about new customer acquisition. And as with all of these webinars, we're recording them. So if you missed one, just let me know, and we'll send the recording to you or the link to the recording. So last time we talked about how do you build the revenue growth engine, revenue acceleration engine as we call it, for new customer acquisition. And there is a best practices process, recipe if you will, on how to do this. And we've done this serially over and over again for many clients. So we're just tremendously competent at doing this and sharing with you this experience that we've had over hundreds of clients. Today, of course, we're going to talk about customer upsell and cross-sell. And I can't think of a more timely webinar than where we are today, because when you have economic headwinds or if you have a recession, many times it's the best place to go for additional revenue is your current customers. So there are some really profound ways to do that, some best practices we're going to share with you today, and give you some examples on how our clients are doing that today as we work with them. In a couple of weeks, then we're going to have the next webinar, and this is the 3rd revenue growth vector, and that's going to be on new solution and services launch. And the key that we look at with this webinar is every company is bringing out new services, new solutions to the marketplace. The challenge for most of the executive team is that you're investing in creating that new solution, but many times the accompanying revenue doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because how it was launched. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how can you launch these new services and solutions and really ensure that you're going to have a breakthrough trend in terms of customer acquisition, prospect acquisition, and get the revenue in the door. And then finally, on January 12th, we're going to complete this 4th series, and we're going to talk about channel partner sales. So the key here is having what we talk about resellers or sell through partners, and how do you drive sales with those partners? Those partners, if it's done properly, you can move from what we call an opportunistic partnership to a proactive partnership. One where you seldom see revenue coming in the door to one where you see revenue coming in the door every month. It's really a big swing for most companies. And so these are the 4 areas we talk about, the 4 revenue growth vectors that you can apply today leading into 2023 to ensure your success. So what can you expect from today's webinar? Well, first of all, we're going to discuss how you can grow your revenue with customers. And I've looked at many of your websites, many of your backgrounds for all of you that are attending. So I have a good sense in terms of the mix of companies that we have here today. One thing I would share with you too is that what we're going to cover for you means just as much if you're a startup company, a mid-stage company, or a public company. So this is really about revenue acceleration, way beyond perhaps your expectations that you have for 2023. So sometimes when I sit down and talk to a CEO, their expectations may be to grow revenue by, let's say, 5 or 10%. year over year. But I would encourage you to think outside the box and think about what is truly potential for your company, because in many cases, it's our own expectations that are holding us back. The second area we're going to talk about is addressing some of the challenges or obstacles that you have today for growing customer revenue and wallet share. And then finally, we're going to talk about some really innovative practices that you can apply to achieve with these goals today. Just a little bit of background on On-Demand Advisors. We are a revenue acceleration agency founded in 2008. And typically we will work with 10 companies every year and help them and their management team scale their revenue growth, scale their success, and really optimize their business model. So for myself, I've been a CEO for both public and private companies. Private companies like Intact that we'll talk about, which is a software as a service company that was tremendously successful and acquired by the Sage Group for $850 million, and Determined, which is a public company. So I've had the good fortune of building companies at different stages. One company, RightWorks, was a pure startup where we took that company from zero to $100 million in 2 years. I've worked at mid-stage companies like Intact, and of course I worked at large public companies like Oracle and Dun & Bradstreet. Craig, my partner, is also tremendously talented at what he does and brings to the table. And he has started with many of the branding firms in San Francisco, where we worked with those firms and helped branding for significant companies, iconic companies like Levi Strauss, like Google, like Disney. And then he became a chief marketing officer. So he's been a serial chief marketing officer in Silicon Valley and with many different companies, really strategically helping them scale and grow their marketing efforts. And of course, Craig and I met up at Intact, where I was the CEO and he was the CMO. So we bring ourselves as principals, but we also have 4 practices at On-Demand Advisors. We have a strategy practice. We have a practice around marketing. We have a practice around sales enablement. And then we have another practice around strategic alliances and business development. One of the foundational things that we'll talk about today is what we call the revenue acceleration system. This system, as you look at this infographic in front of you today, really kind of represents a best practices approach to scaling predictable revenue growth that's capital efficient, that is consistent, and that's going to give you the ability to scale up and down. But most importantly, for most of you, it's going to give you transparency in terms of this system, this winning system that you have, so that you really understand how the revenue happens. You don't have to sit there and say, Wichi, I hope I have a great VP of sales. I hope I have a great CMO. I hope I have a tremendous VP of business development. You really want to understand how this is done, how this work is accomplished, and you want to be able to institutionalize these best practices across your team. So today we're just going to focus on customer upsell and cross-sell, and we'll cover that in a moment. But in this system that we have that we've helped many companies implement successfully, that we first created at Intact, we realized there needed to be a playbook, a blueprint, if you will, on how to scale and grow revenue and do that in a very efficient way that eliminates much of the mindless experimentation that typically happens. So the purple is strategic, the red is marketing, the yellow is sales, and the green is partner leverage or strategic alliances. And everybody that will be attending today will receive a copy of this. Let's talk about customer engagement. And I'd like to talk about customer engagement since we're talking about customer upsell, cross-sell to drive revenue growth in 3 different areas. So if you think about customer engagement, and you may or may not think about it in these 3 areas, but it's helpful for our conversation today to do that. The first is customer service. Now we all have customer support operations, that work teams that work for us here, and that's typically focusing around supporting our customers. It's typically about timely resolution and escalation for issues or challenges. It's about providing 24 by 7 by 365 coverage, and it's focusing around retention, eliminating churn, and loyalty. So that's the first area. And by the way, we help companies in all aspects of this customer life cycle, if you will. So the second one is customer success. So some of the companies we work with have a customer success program, some do not. And we're going to discuss different aspects of that today. And we're going to cover a couple of these very important areas, but we won't cover all of them because we just don't have time to do that in today's webinar. But a customer success program, and we're going to go through one of those examples today, is really focused around outbound engagement with your customers. It's not waiting for them to come to you. It's creating that vibrant integration with your customers where you're going to be working with them and proactively helping move the needle forward. One of the things we're going to be talking about is having either quarterly or at least annual account business reviews, or ABRs, as they're known in the industry. And that's really something we're going to talk about in terms of having that tremendous interaction that happens with their team and your team in determining the plan forward for both companies. We're going to talk about creating customer success plans, and we're going to talk about putting together what we call customer success webinars. Now, these could be webinars, they could be ebooks, they could be videos, they could take any number of different forms, but we're going to focus on webinars because, like today, they can be very interactive and they could be also tremendously beneficial in terms of 45 or 60 minutes of great interchange and content. As part of the customer success, also you have your Net Promoter Score, and then you have focusing on what we would call competency and ROI with your service or solution. The next area is customer expansion. So customer expansion is really, again, focused upon outbound engagement with your customers. And it's going to be focusing on something that I'm really excited about, which is what's your host solution? Whatever you think your solution is today, it's not enough. The final determinant as far as what the host solution exists or is today is your customer. So many of us create great solutions, great services, but it's part of a bigger picture, part of a bigger package. And so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about launching new services and new solutions, both today as well as in next webinar. And we're going to talk about thought leadership that you can apply today and take your messaging from the tactical to the strategic for your decision makers. So this is about the customer engagement and the three different areas we have today, which is starting with customer support, customer success, and then customer expansion. Okay, so those are the areas we want to cover today. And what I'd like to do is, next step is just ask a question from the audience. If you would be kind enough to participate, we'd really appreciate that. So when you think about heading into next year and you think about the potential to grow your customer revenue, what do you think about? What do you think your chances are of doing that? And let me go ahead and launch the poll for everybody. So when you think about that, are you thinking about you're going to grow, one of your goals is to grow revenue with your customers by, let's say, 10%? Or are you thinking about it more of a moderate perspective? You want to grow it by 50% year over year? Do you think about growing revenue by a significant group? Do you think about growing revenue by doubling revenue growth with your customers? Or are you not really sure what the level should be? So go ahead and participate in our poll, and I'll share the results with everybody. Okay, we'll just keep it open for just another second or two. Okay, really good. Thank you very much for participating. Let me share the results here. So 15% of you joining us today believe that you're going to grow customer revenue by, let's say, 10%. 65%, which is fantastic, stated you're going to grow revenue by a goal of 50%. And then 20% stated like you'd like to double revenue growth for your customers. That's excellent. Then this webinar definitely is for you. So I'm going to walk you through 5 areas on how to do this. And I'm going to discuss examples in each area. The first is you need to create what we call an intentional revenue engineering model. And what we mean by that is it's very, very good that a lot of times you'll sit down at the end of the year, like we're here in December, and you'll say, okay, what do we want to do next year? Well, we may say we want to grow revenue by, we talked about, let's say 50% customer revenue. Or we may say we want to grow new customers by 30% year over year. The question is intentionality here. What do you want to do? Who are the type of new customers that you want to bring aboard? And what would be their profile? And what constitutes customer success? We're going to talk about that. And what constitutes wallet share, 100% wallet share with customers. So if your goal for next year is to grow revenue by $8 million, we may say that $2 million of that is going to come from your customers. And as you may know from the revenue acceleration system infographic that we covered before, we have 3 different funnels here. We have a marketing funnel, we had a lead development funnel, and we have a sales funnel. So if your average customer upsell, cross-sell transaction is valued at $40,000 a year, then you're going to need 50 of those to get to $2 million next year. The good news about selling to customers too is that your conversion rates in these funnels is typically much better than it is with prospects, new prospects. So in this case, what we're going to need is we're going to need to create 50 new transactions. And if your conversion rate is 33%, your sales funnel, then you're going to need 150 sales qualified leads. In the middle funnel, if your conversion rate is much higher, which is great, then what we're going to be able to do here is we're going to need to create the number of MQLs, market qualified leads. And from there, then we're going to be able to figure out what do we need on a monthly basis. So in this case, in this model, we would need 60 market qualified leads per month. We would need to graduate them into 12 sales qualified leads, and we would need to close 4. So this is just what we call revenue engineering. And the reason why this is important is because you want to create a predictable model. Now, because we're talking about 4 revenue growth vectors, your current customers is $2 million. The webinar we had last 2 weeks ago, we talked about how to grow revenue by $4 million for new customer acquisition. Our next webinar, we're going to talk about you launching new services, new solutions, and how do you garner another 500,000. And then finally, after that, we're going to talk about how do you get an additional $1.5 million through your partner channel. So all told, these are all contributions to your revenue engine that you need for 2023. So the first thing is intentionality, making sure that you've got a mathematical model that you feel comfortable with. And you also have this notion about thinking about customers. What constitutes customer success? Now, I find this question is really interesting because a lot of clients really haven't fully baked what is success for their clients. So what I just put down was a couple different criteria, but you may create your own criteria. So for instance, a successful customer for you may be somebody who provides significant revenue contribution to your company each and every year. You may also look at somebody that is using your services today and they are fully utilizing your services. So you may have a number of different services today. So for instance, when we worked with Screw Dude, one of the companies that we actually helped implement their upsell cross-sell program, their challenge was not market penetration, it was wallet share. because when we began working with them, they already had 6,000 higher education institutions, universities and colleges and community colleges that were their clients. Their issue was that they had grown from one solution to 15, and their typical client only had two or three. So what we needed to do was put in this type of program, which is what we did, so that we could grow the average wallet share from 2 to 3 to 10 across those higher educational entities. Another thing that you would be looking at is customer success, may be business benefits realized and ROI. So what's interesting, and I've been in the software industry for many years, is a lot of times when you would provide a enterprise solution, let's say it's an ERP system, or it's a CRM system, or it's HR. A lot of times what you'd see is people, the objective was to get them live. Let's just get them in production. Let's get them using the system. Let's get them live. Now, I personally don't look at that as customer success. I look at them getting them live, but I really look at customer success as achieving their goals and achieving ROI, measurable ROI in terms of where the value is. And then there are other areas too that we could look at what constitutes success. So referenceability may be something you're looking for. So this is about it being intentional with your customers and what you're trying to achieve. I hope that helps. The second thing we like to do is, if you're going to have a customer upsell, cross-sell program, is you've got to create your customer engagement assets. And one of the things that I find as a major takeaway from today is redefining your total solution. And I'm going to talk about that and give you some examples. What you have today is a partial solution. What you want to offer in the future is your total solution. One of the things we're also going to talk about is mapping out your accounts, because in many cases, especially if you're dealing with large accounts, you may find that you're not reaching many people. You may find that there are maybe 50, 100 people, thousands of people that could benefit from your solution, but only a fraction of that group is using it today. You may also find that you've been selling too low, and you need to get higher up in the organization. Start talking to some of the VPs, the chief operating officer, the CEO, maybe even the board, about what you can do for them. And so it's important to be able to map the organization and have a strategy in terms of how you're going to branch out. Another thing when you get in front of customers is being able to understand how have they used your solution or services. What's been their usage? What's the value that you helped them create? Because that's really what you're going to launch from. And then finally, one of the assets that you want to build is your ABR meeting deck. What does that conversation look like? What's the flow? How should it take place? And we're going to talk about what are the outcomes you should be looking for. So let's talk about the first one, which is redefining the whole solution. The whole solution for your client may be software, it may be services, it may be third-party extensions. You may have some integration into third-party solutions, for instance. It may need for you to map out the ecosystem that really creates the total solution for your customer. And to bring that home, I'd like to give you a couple of different examples. One of our customers is a company called ICUC. They are strictly a services company focused on providing social media management services to the Fortune 2500. And so this is they're right here. So one of the things that we help them do is we help them launch new solutions, bringing to the market. But as we were launching these new solutions, we realized that we were getting a lot of point solutions. So some of you today, I've looked at your offerings. Some of you have lots of different point solutions on your website. The challenge is that when you have a lot of point solutions, it's hard for your customers to understand how they should look at those solutions, which ones they should buy or invest in. This also could be difficult for the sales team to provide those solutions as point solutions. So how do you make sense out of this? Well, let me show you how we did this with ICUC. As we were helping them launch new solutions like social commerce, for instance, we realized that there was actually a social journey, a customer journey for each of those customers. So if they worked with Starbucks, or they worked with Novartis, or they worked with Google, which are their customers, there was actually a journey that each of their customers were going through. And so there is this journey when you're going through social media of being discovered, um, get the awareness factor. And then how do you educate? How do you convert that into sales? And then how do you grow customer influence? And so what we did is we created this journey, and then we started mapping the different solutions and services that they offer to this. So you could see that all of these services, both old and new, really made a lot of sense in terms of helping progress their customer through that social journey. Okay, let me give you another example. Another one of our clients is Technical Toolboxes. We talk about moving them from seats to suites. So the seats were, when we began working with them, is they would sell a engineering performance management solution. Let's say it's a pipeline toolbox to an engineer or group of engineers, and that was typically sold as a number of seats per application. As we launched more and more solutions with them, we realized that we could graduate and fill out suites that would be functional suites for the large oil and gas and energy companies that they worked with. So at the hub is the hub is the integration factor, integration platform for their solution. But what we did is we helped them build out these suites. So for inspections of pipelines, for instance, there is a complete suite of applications for just inspection. For hydraulics, you would have a complete suite that the engineers would use for managing hydraulics that they would have in their facilities. For managing corrosion across each of these different sets of pipelines, like a Kinder Morgan, for instance, would have 70,000 miles of pipeline. You needed to be able to manage that corrosion and integrity across that entire pipeline. So what we helped them do is build suites, because if you looked at their organizations inside these companies, like a Chevron, for instance, you would find that the engineers are broken into different groups, and you wanted to align the solutions with the different groups. So this is how we actually help two companies, as we're talking about this today, really redefine the total solution. And we would love to help you do that too, as we're thinking about moving forward, as far as figuring out what's the right way to bundle, what's the right way to price, what's the right way to message, what's the right way to position. Another thing that you can do is use databases such as this one here, Zoom Info, that we actually use ourselves, and start mapping out the organizations. So for instance, if I want to look at the engineering team at a specific company, I can go to Enbridge as an organization, and I can start mapping out the engineering team, and I can start seeing the engineering hierarchy, who reports to who. So if you have a contact, and let's say that's a mid-level contact manager, you may wonder, where do they report into? Where are the other groups that are peers to them? And then who are the folks underneath them? This is tremendously helpful when you're trying to do account-based marketing and trying to figure out how you're going to take total advantage of working with a large company that has many different locations, many different instances. So that's the area that I find really tremendously exciting, is always thinking about how do you map out your solution? How do you expand it or redefine it? How do you make it broader? And sometimes it might be adding additional services. So for instance, you may be offering a solution today that is a solution that customers implement. But you may find that there are certain types of customers, for instance, that really don't have the competency to operate that solution themselves. So in that case, you may come up with a managed services offering where you provide the service or the solution to them as a service. And then consequently, all they're really interested in is using the service, not in being competent in the use of the application or the platform. So let's look at the next area. And this is going to be the third area that we're going to get into. And let me ask this question, if I could, from everybody today. When you think about your customers that you have today, are you holding quarterly or annual performance review meetings with them today? So simply yes, no, or you're not sure, um, depending upon which area you're coming to this webinar from. Okay, I'll just keep this open for just a little bit longer, and then I'll close it off. But very good. Thank you very much for participating. I really, really appreciate it very much. Okay, just a couple more seconds, and then we'll close it off and share with everybody. I think that you'll find this insightful too. Okay, here's the results. On our webinar today, 31% of you are holding either quarterly or annual performance review meetings with your clients or customers today. 63% of you are not, and 6% are not sure. So this is really, really hits home in terms of thinking about how do you interact with your clients. One of the things that we found as you migrate into subscription-based models, which is becoming very popular today, Intact was a subscription-based software as a service company, is you're always thinking about how do you increase usage? How do you increase the stickiness of your service or solution? So this is going to be a key way to do this. This is a key way to get alignment with your customers, and I think it's going to be really important to be able to do that. So what we would suggest, and we help companies do that, is we have a team that will actually set up these meetings with customers. And what we want to do is help create what's called the ABR, Annual Business Review Meeting Agenda. And that typically could be a presentation, PowerPoint, discussion, whiteboard, but it typically follows a process that we look at. And the reason for having these meetings is, number one, is you want to get higher up. It's always about expanding into companies. It's about meetings, for instance, new leadership. If you're not at the VP level or the CXO level, this is an opportunity to be able to do that. It's also about providing the customer with customer metrics, some that they may capture today, some that they may not. And it's also about reaffirming and reiterating the value that you create each and every day. Finally, one of the things that's really important to customers is they looking for your feedback in terms of how are they doing? How are they doing in terms of benchmarking themselves against other like customers? And then also, as you think about what their goals are for 2023 and 2024 and beyond, how do you create that path forward that's aligned with them? So these meetings, that you could call them performance reviews, you can call them health checks, you can call them business review meetings, you can call them any number of things, are extremely important because it is the reattachment with your customer that happens. Once you have the meeting, then the next step is what's the follow-up plan to close and move that process forward. And I talk about the floor and the ceiling. And I would venture for everybody that's on today's webinar that you'll see that there is a floor and there's a ceiling. The floor may be, for instance, let's say you have a solution today. Let's say it's an HR solution. And you're going to go out there and talk to your customer again. The floor may be they just need to migrate to the latest release and they need to get some people trained or retrained. So that would be the floor. But as you talk to them about their needs, their use, their benefits that they're achieving, you find out that you can expand the usage for your existing solutions and services. The other thing, which is the ceiling, is identifying new initiatives at their company where you can actually provide benefit and assistance. The one thing that is a byproduct of having these ABR meetings is creating a referenceability database. If you have 200 customers, the question will always be, which ones are the referenceable customers that you can engage with today? Because the next 200 customers that will be coming aboard will going to be like they're going to want to talk to the 200 that you have today. And so consequently, building that referenceability database is an enormously beneficial and important outcome of this process. Let me give you an example. One of our clients is a company called Max Recall. Max Recall has been very successful, focusing on a number of different verticals, such as wholesale distributors, and providing document management and business process automation solutions to them. What we actually created with them is the ABR program, and we actually have been setting up 4 to 6 meetings with them every week with their customers. It's just tremendous. It's been tremendous for them in terms of getting reattached with customers. They're meeting CFOs and executives that they didn't have a chance to meet with before. And they're also finding a tremendous amount of new opportunities to scale. And so one of the things that their customers don't understand, so for instance, this one is Horizon. And what Horizon probably didn't understand is that Max Recall is already managing 4 million different critical documents for them. And so this was really eye-opening, I call it the money shot, if you will, for Horizon, because they didn't realize how integral Max Recall is to their operations. So it really gave an opportunity to reset the expectations. The other thing about customers that's really important is a lot of times if you've had customers, let's say for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and so forth, they may realize that they know you for who you were, not who you are. So this is an opportunity for you to work with them to really help them understand who they are. Now, what we're doing also with Max Recall is we're moving from just document management and process automation into process optimization. So for each of their clients, they can offer the end-to-end solution to actually help move them forward in terms of the optimizing the purchasing cycle, the HR cycle, the sales tax exemption cycle, and so forth. So this is an excellent way for us to move and look at what's the real solution we talked about. Well, the real solution for their customers is much bigger than what they currently have deployed. So this is an opportunity for Max Recall to really go out there and to look at how to provide more value to their customers. So that's the third point. The fourth area I'd like to talk about is your customer engagement roadmap. One of the things I would encourage in conjunction with these ABR meetings that you're having every month with customers, and we can help you get them set up, is really implementing at least a monthly program where you're going to have webinars or get customers together on a monthly basis. And this really keeps them invigorated and excited and engaged with your company. And I'm going to give you some examples on how to do this. So one of the ways that customers love to get together is to share best practices. How am I using your services today? How am I using your platform today? And there's nothing more powerful than having a customer get up and present to other customers how they're using your solutions today and benefiting from them. Another thing that you want to do is have, as part of this series, new solution or new services launch. So if you're coming out with new innovations all the time like we are, it's important to keep up and keep your customers informed as far as what you're offering, and have a interactive format like a webinar to be able to do that. And then finally, thought leadership, or the influencer series as I call it, And that's really talking to your audience. So let me give you an example. One of our customers is Visibility Software. They are a leader in providing talent management solutions, so recruiting, onboarding, and training for companies. And one of the things that we created with them is a webinar series. It's a 5-part webinar series, and it's really talking about something that's really important for nonprofits, which is how do you win the talent war or the war on talent. And so one of the verticals that they have 73 nonprofits today, is expanding that market share into nonprofits and to be able to talk to the executive directors, the VP of HR, the CFO, and the other heads of each nonprofit. And so what we did is we created a 5-part webinar series. We found out through our research what were the critical issues that companies were faced with today in terms of their talent search, acquisition, talent retention, and then talent growth. And so we found that not-for-profits, about 75% of them didn't have a talent management strategy. And so one of the things that Sean and the team are talking to these organizations about is creating a talent management strategy. The next thing is talking about talent management insights. What are the insights that you should be thinking about if you're running a nonprofit? And so that's a webinar that Visibility Software, we're going to help them execute this month. Next month, we're going to talk about how do you expand your talent pool. After that, we're going to talk about improving your talent experience, and then finally growing your talent. So this whole series that we're talking about is focused around customers and prospects, but really more focused around some of the customers that they have out there today and how they can get greater value, strategic value through the solutions and platforms that the company provides. So this is a great way to do that. Now, let me put this in perspective on an Excel spreadsheet. Most people say, well, how do I even get started in doing this? Well, the first thing is, as we talked about right here, create your assets. And we help companies do that each and every day, which is create their assets. The next area is mapping all of your customers, mapping all of your contacts, and then setting up these ABR meetings with them. And then that's something that typically happens on a weekly, monthly basis. As we're doing with Max Recall, we're helping them set up 4 to 6 meetings every week. So as we work through their entire customer base, that's going to typically take us for the next 12 months. In parallel to that, though, is also executing a webinar series or a series focused on where's the value for customers. Now, customers also want to know what you're doing as far as upgrading your services, upgrading your platform, enhancements, but they also are interested in best practices sharing. They're interested in thought leadership, industry trends, and they're also interested in new innovations that they can apply to their business. So this is a great way to be thinking about your customer engagement initiative. So for our webinar today, let's recap. How do you put in place your upsell, cross-sell revenue program? Well, first of all, you create that intentional revenue plan that we talked about, which is revenue engineering, to really think through and determine what's the revenue contribution you want next year from your customers. Then it's about creating the customer engagement assets, which we help our clients do each and every day, and then setting up and conducting your ABR meetings. And I tell you what, there's just tremendous value in each and every one of these meetings that's happening, as it is today with Max Recall. And then in parallel to that, executing your customer engagement roadmap, as we shared with you with Visibility Software. And what they're doing to really align with strategic value and thought leadership that they have for different verticals, including nonprofits. And then what's the key? Stay in front, stay engaged with your customer. One last takeaway then, if I could get your input on as far as a poll, if you'd be so kind to give us your thoughts on what is your takeaway from today's webinar. So when you walk away from today, what's the one thing you think that you think about doing? And by the way, it's not one thing, you could say multiple things here. This is multiple choice. That is to identify more customer upsell and cross-sell opportunities. Perhaps it's that you want to implement your ABR meetings that we're talking about here. The third may be to create a customer engagement roadmap. The fourth may be to create your customer success plan. So go ahead if you could and participate in that. Check off all the ones that you think would be appropriate. Always love to get your input on this and feedback so we can provide tremendous value to you each and every time you participate, because I do realize your time is very important. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll keep this poll open for just a little bit more and then I'll share the results. Okay, let me go ahead and share this. So 36% of you want to identify more customer upsell and cross-sell opportunities. 64% want to implement these frequent ABR meetings that we talked about. 71% want to create a customer engagement roadmap. This is really fantastic to hear, really critical in terms of staying in front and engage with your customer each and every month. And then 43% stated you'd like to create your customer success plan. Thank you very much for participating on those. What I'd like to do at this point is let's open it up for Q&A. So go ahead if you could, post the questions that you have, and we'd love to get as many questions as we can answered in today's webinar before we talk about next steps. So let's go ahead and see what questions you have. Okay, the first one is from Margie. Margie says, how can you help us with our positioning, moving from a commodity to an important value proposition? That's a good one, Margie. A lot of companies today sell too low. They may sell at a transactional level. They may even commoditize themselves. And so one of the things that we try to do when we work with our clients is conduct what we call a strategic messaging workshop, which is really to help figure out how to elevate the messaging. I talk about the 4 elevators, from talking about just benefits that you may have for your services and what your services or your software or platform does, to then value, and then from value to process optimization, and from process optimization to ROI and outcomes. So that's something that we would typically do. Next question. Here's a question. This one is from Mark, talking about customers. How do we measure value we create? That's one of the things we talked about. That's a good question, Mark. One of the things that we typically do when we talk with clients is talk about, first of all, what is the value that your customer or client wants to receive from your service or solution? And then how do you benchmark that before you implement them? And how do you benchmark it after they go live or they start benefiting from the usage? If you can measure that, you can quantify it, then you can put an ROI together with that. So that's a good way to do it. This one is from Jennifer. This question says, we have many point solutions. How do we sell more to each customer? Good question. In fact, those really, Jennifer, great question. Those were what we were talking about earlier in terms of our examples that we went through with both technical toolboxes and ICUC. They too had many different point solutions. They just weren't assembling them together into the bundles that they could, and elevating the strategic value to that. The other thing is, just by doing this, your price points are going to go up. So you may be able to double revenue not only by selling in these bundled solutions, but also be able to sell higher up, and also to sell at a greater monetary value because of the bundle. So great questions there. Let's see. There's one more question we'll take here. And this one is from Troy. Troy says, how can we build referenceability with our customers? Good question. I think that it goes back to many things we talked about. If you have, Troy, these frequent ABR meetings with the management team at your customer or client, I think it's going to give you an opportunity to get better alignment with what they want to accomplish strategically, and then how do they see you as being an enabler for that success. So that's one of the things I look at as far as referenceability. The other thing I look at is helping them measure what the difference is. In many cases, someone may use a service or a platform or a software solution, and they may see value in it, but they haven't measured it. They haven't benchmarked it. That's an area where we can actually help them do that. And then once you do that, you can put a number to it, much like we talked about with Max Recall. So great questions here, and thank you for those questions. So what would be some next steps here? One is we'd love to talk to you about discussing your revenue growth goals that you have for 2023. For many companies today, we're sitting down with them and creating their revenue acceleration playbook for next year as well as future years. And we also would be happy to help you create your customer upsell and cross-sell program. And so please reach out to us. I'll reach out to you to make sure that you have access to this recording, access to our revenue acceleration system, and please register for these upcoming webinars that we have. So on December 20th, we're going to talk about the new service or solution launch and how do you really make that successful? How do you really go to market with that and achieve the revenue growth goals you're looking for? And then on January 12th, we're going to talk about channel partner ecosystem sales and how do you make that happen? So these are your revenue growth vectors. And as always, we would love to contribute to your revenue growth. One of the things you'll find that about our company is we're focusing on not just sales, not just marketing, but on revenue. Creating revenue, scaling revenue, doing it in a best practices way. And for those of you that don't have the resources or the talent inside your company, we'll provide that for you as we do. And many of our clients that we work with today stay with us for 3 years or more. So we're really interested in a strategic relationship with you and helping you succeed. So here's the contact information for myself, for Craig. You're welcome to email us, call us, text us, and happy to set up a meeting with you to talk about how do we actually help you be truly successful in 2023 and beyond. On behalf of myself and our entire On-Demand Advisors team, thank you very much for joining us today with our webinar about how to engineer your revenue growth for 2023. Have a great day, everyone.